Welcome to Confession Corner, where we deep dive into the real stories that are hidden in the depths. If you're new here, hit that like button, share this with your friends, and subscribe. We post 3 to 4 times a week. Ready to dive in? Let's get started. What's something unexplainable that you've experienced? When I was around 8 to 9 years old, it was the first time my parents let me stay home alone since they were out doing something. Dinner, or something of that sort. I can't remember exactly. It was around 10 to 10:30 p.m., I would say, as it was very dark outside. I heard some weird scratching and whispering sounds coming from downstairs. My room was on the top floor, and I was starting to get a little antsy. I opened my door and exited my room. The scratching was getting louder, and whispering was getting more intense. For whatever reason, just about every light in the house was turned off, so when I exited my room, it was pretty much pitch black in the hallway, aside from the light coming from my room. I went out into the hallway and flipped the switch on. The light turned on, and the scratching and whispering noises suddenly just stopped altogether. I look down the stairs and I see a hand and arm curve around the corner leading into the living room, and it started to make a sort of come hither motion with its finger. Keep in mind, this hand was incredibly disproportionate to what a normal human hand should look like. The fingers were way too long and the nails were massive. The entire situation was just wrong, and I was absolutely terrified. I just ran back into my room and hid in the closet for the next half hour until my parents got home. When they arrived, they called me back down, and I was incredibly disturbed to find numerous tiny scratch marks etched into the ceiling and walls right beneath my room. I asked my parents if they had been home for a while, and of course they said that they hadn't. I tried to explain what happened, but I doubt that they believed me at all. I still get a weird and deeply disturbed feeling when approaching stairs, which is an odd fear to say the least. This is easily the strangest thing I have ever experienced, and it still doesn't make sense to me to think about now. So I've lurked on Reddit for the memes for 5 years, and this is the first post that made me need to sign up, because I have a story to tell. Growing up, I had an acquaintance we'll call M. We went to the same church, the same school, but I was 2 years older than M, and when you're 5, that's a world of difference. I was aware of M's existence, the same way I was aware of the sun. You know it's warm, but you don't really look at it, so I happily passed through high school without thinking much of M as a person of interest in my life. But then I was 28, having gone to college, and loved and worked just like everyone else, until I had a dream. I was sitting on a bus next to a woman. She was older than I remembered, her dark hair streaked with gray and shorter than it had been when I last saw her. It must have been 20 years since I'd seen M's mother, but it was her, wearing a pair of dark slacks and a crimson sweater with a button fixed to one shoulder. The bus was old and smelled odd, its vinyl seats creaking when it stuttered and screeched to a halt on the side of the road. In my dream, I stood up, but someone on the other side of M's mother made to stand too, and it was M herself. I took her hand and we walked off the bus. Turning around, I saw M's mother give a shallow wave as the doors hissed closed and the bus roared away from the curb and motored down the street. I blinked awake, and it was around 6:30 a.m. I couldn't go back to sleep because the dream was so vivid. After a shower and a coffee, I picked up my phone and checked my social media. A friend of a friend of a friend had posted that M's mother had died that morning after an elective surgery gone wrong that lasted most of the night. Maybe it could have been coincidence or deja vu, whatever mental exercise my mind needed to go through that morning. Maybe something had triggered it in those days leading up to it. I don't know what it was, but it fucked me up that morning. I couldn't even send my condolences the same way all the friends of friends had done. I honestly just wanted to ignore it happened at all. Then 2 days later, I was filling up my gas tank at pump number 7, and I saw her at pump number 3. M come home to take care of her mother's affairs. She was wearing a pair of black jeans paired with a deep red sweater and an ivory-colored button holding the sides of one shoulder together. It's honestly hard to explain what happened next. The awkward hellos that led to long coffee dates, M moving home from the big city and moving into her mother's house. The first time I held her hand, and it felt just like in the dream. We married 2 years later, and I never told her about what I saw on the bus. I didn't want to sound crazy. Honestly, for a long time, I forgot about it until we got a cat. The cat had a habit of staring long, for like hours, at one corner every night. Maybe he sees a ghost, I said idly. And then we had a long conversation about the possibility of ghosts or spirits or whatever. I thought a lot about her mother. "Can I tell you something strange?" M said. "The night my mother died, I had a dream, and you were holding my hand. You don't have to believe that this actually happened to me. I'll believe for you, because it happened to me. There are things that I can't explain in this life, but I know that the night I dreamed of my future mother-in-law deceased on a bus shot my life in a direction I never knew existed, and I'm so fucking grateful it happened." I used to work as a sleep study technician at various sleep clinics. When I first got the job, a few of my fellow techs warned me about the haunted clinic. I thought they were joking. They weren't. They told me about the creepy things that would happen there. Some techs refused to work there again. I was already assigned to a couple of clinics and hoped I would never have to work at the haunted one. It was probably a year into the job when the tech who was working that clinic quit, and I was asked to take over there, starting that night. Dread started building up in the pit of my stomach when I saw that place. It was a creepy old Victorian mansion that was divided up into a bunch of doctors' offices, around 130 years old, based on a little research I did on it later. It originally belonged to some prominent local politician, then was turned into apartments, then into the offices. I told myself it was just an old house, no big deal. I walked into the dark lobby, turned on the lights, and walked up the creaky stairs to the sleep clinic on the second story. I took a tour of the clinic, getting myself acquainted with it. I felt fine until I got to what was formerly a kitchen and was now used as a storage or prep room. I started feeling uneasy. Right next door was the final room, which was one of the bedrooms the patients would sleep in. I hated that room. Bad vibes as soon as I stepped into it. I didn't even believe in places being haunted, but that room made me start to consider it. It was always so much colder than the rest of the clinic. Poor insulation, I would tell myself. Doors would swing open on their own. It's just gravity. The doors aren't level, I would tell myself. I would hear creaking floorboards when I knew there was no one else in the building, just the sleeping patients and myself. Old houses creak, I would tell myself. I would think I saw shadows and lights out of the corner of my eye. Just my imagination. That one room kept getting infested with bugs, but never the other rooms. The TV in there kept breaking. The light bulbs kept going out. The sleep study equipment would malfunction. The patients I put to sleep into that one room would complain. It was too cold. It felt creepy. They felt like they were being watched. No one ever complained about the other bedroom in the clinic. I worked nights in that clinic for a couple years. Finally, one day at the end of my shift, I woke up the patient who was sleeping in the problem room. I knew she slept poorly based on her sleep study. I asked her how she was feeling. She told me she didn't sleep well because she kept dreaming over and over again that there were dead bodies in the walls. I could tell she was scared. I couldn't take it anymore after that. After the patients left, I had to go back in that room and clean it up as I trembled and thought about how I was all alone in the building. When I finished up, I literally ran out of the building to my car. I decided to finally quit. Turns out I didn't have to. The doctor decided to close that clinic. I only had to work another 2 or 3 nights there. Thankfully, on those nights, I only had one patient, so I was able to put them in the good bedroom and leave the problem room alone. This will probably be lost in the comments somewhere, but here's my story. Several months ago, I had finally passed my motorcycle test and had taken to riding everywhere in my city. At the time, I was on my little 250 Ninja and found that one of my favorite routes was riding from the hills into the city and through Kings Park in Perth. Nothing seemed out of place, and the night was warm. Kings Park has winding roads everywhere and lots of war memorials. It's not lit by lights in most areas, so it becomes pitch black. As I was riding through a dark area about 12ish at night, I turned my high beams on. It's about 40 kilometers per hour through the park. As I rounded a bend, I noticed a man standing against a tree. Since I didn't want to blind the poor bastard, I turned my high beams down. In that split second of doing that, the dude disappeared. I had to do a double take. Was I imagining that shit? I stopped my bike and looked over. Nobody was there. No bark on the tree to show a silhouette of a man. No bush close by, too. I noped out of there quick as, fair dinkum, it scared the living piss out of me. What I find most bizarre about the experience is that at the base of these trees there is a small plaque that commemorates the life of a fallen soldier in the war. Had I seen the spirit of that fallen soldier? I don't really believe in ghosts, but I'll stand by what I saw, and I certainly don't take late rides through Kings Park alone anymore. I've been looking for a good opportunity to get this onto Reddit, and now is my chance. So about 2 years ago now, I was out doing errands with my mom. Pretty normal. We stop at a fruit and veggie market and are doing some shopping when we stop at the tomatoes. I notice a particularly large and deformed tomato, so naturally I pick it up for further inspection. I turn this tomato around, and underneath is this really gross-looking rotten spot. It's all green and mushy. I put it back down and we pay and leave. Now this is where it gets really weird. We make a last stop at the grocery store before going home for some other items, and while walking through the produce section, I notice in the pile of tomatoes an eerily similar looking one to the monster I had picked up at the market. I had this super odd feeling come over me, almost like deja vu. I pick up this new tomato and I swear to you it was the exact same tomato. Same large size and deformity and the gross, rotten underbelly. My mom thought I was insane and brushed it off because I was freaking out about this interdimensional tomato. This sounds so stupid as I'm typing it out, but I swear I picked up the same tomato in 2 different places within the span of an hour. This will probably get buried, but here goes. About 10 years ago, I was 17 at the time, in the house I grew up in, something happened that has absolutely no logical explanation. I had this heavy, ornate, hand-blown glass picture frame that sat on my dresser in my bedroom with a picture of me and my mom in it. I was home alone and had been in my room most of the day sorting laundry and cleaning up. At one point, I was bringing a load of laundry back into my room, and I noticed the frame was face down on my dresser, which I thought was strange because I didn't hear it fall or anything, and as I said, it was a pretty heavy glass frame. So I go over to pick it up, and in doing so, I see the picture inside the frame is now completely upside down. The picture frame obviously only stands one way. It's not like I picked it up wrong or IDK. I went through so many scenarios in a matter of seconds in utter confusion, but nothing made sense. I had chills down my spine. It just wasn't possible. Somehow the frame had been taken apart and the picture had been taken out and turned upside down and placed back in. No shot. I was completely alone. I panicked and just put it back down and left immediately to my dad's house and refused to go back until my mom got home. I had a friend in high school who told me about her entire family hearing very vague music playing at night when they would try to fall asleep. There was no distinct tune or audible words. It was just very quiet music that could only be heard when you're trying to fall asleep. Well, years later, her and I became really close, and I spent the night at her house for the first time. It was almost 4 a.m., and I just couldn't fall asleep because I kept hearing what sounded like someone watching a musical at a super low volume in the room next door. I couldn't hear any words or a tune, but it was definitely music. I asked her why her brother was watching a movie at 4 a.m., and her response was, "Oh no, that's just the music that everyone hears at night." It had been so many years that I had forgotten she told me that story, and honestly doubted how truthful it was. It was a weird-ass experience for sure. I used to have this recurring dream which would end with me crossing the road in front of my school and getting hit by a red truck and dying every time. It made me feel paranoid about crossing that road at times, but I used to brush it off as it's just a dream. One day when I was crossing the road while on my phone, an old man pulled me back and said, "You were warned so many times and still you are careless." I looked up and saw the exact same red truck passing in front of me. I asked him who he was, and he said, "I am your friend." I shook his hand and thanked him for saving me and asked him about if he knew me. He replied, "I am in a hurry. Listen, I'll meet you here tomorrow. Have a good day, friend." I never saw him again. I curse at myself for not asking him and convincing him to wait and talk because I had so many questions. I really hope to see him again one day. Something disguised itself as our dog. Started when my husband woke up in the middle of the night to see our dog at the foot of our bed. Their eyes were dark and their mouth didn't look quite right. But other than that, it looked exactly like our dog, Noodle. This thing spoke in a deep voice and said, "Go back to sleep. I'll see you in the morning." Repeatedly. Our household was hearing unexplained growling throughout the night coming from the hallways around 3 a.m. Both dogs were asleep near us, so it wasn't them. Husband would see this thing a few more times in the middle of the night with our dogs. At one point, I saw it myself. Had my dogs locked up in the room while we ate, from the corner of my sight, I see my dog peeking around the corner of the hallway that lead to our room. Thought the boys somehow got out of the room, so I check on them. Nothing in the hallway and door is still closed. At random times, our dog's hair will stand up, and they'll growl and bark, and seemingly nothing. My husband saged the house, didn't work. My roommate did it and it went away, so maybe it was attached to her. Anyways, still can't explain this. Never heard of a spirit or demon or whatever disguising itself as a pet? When I was 11, I went to get something out of the car. On my way back in a car pulled up with a couple of my brother's friends. I saw my brother run to the back of the house, and then I noticed about her car with two men in suits. I go in and tell my mom, "John just ran in the backyard. Some of his friends are in a car out front, and there are two men here to talk to you." She goes to see what they want. They tell her they need to talk to her inside. My brothers had been in trouble with the law before, so this wasn't super abnormal. But next thing I know, she is screaming because they let her know John had been shot and killed by a friend that morning. It'd been almost 19 years, and I still swear I saw him run into the backyard that day. I had a dream that I was chasing someone around a 4 or 5-story building at night. I stepped out of an elevator and they shot me, twice in the abdomen and once in the arm. I drove to work that morning listening to the radio as I always do. The news blurb was about a sheriff who had pulled over a car last night. The driver got out and started running, then turned around and shot the sheriff, hitting him twice in the abdomen and once in his arm. I don't know, man. We rented a house for a few years in England when I was a young teen. Every single time I went in and sat down in our living room, out of the corner of my eye, I would see a man walk into the room, turn and stare at me. Every time, day or night. Whether I'd thought about it or not. If I turned to look, he'd be gone, and as soon as I'd look away, he'd do it again. It got so that I would see how closely I could turn my head to look, using my peripheral vision to make out details, before he'd poof away. He had a large floppy hat, like something a fisherman would wear, and a long leather trench coat. We did not live near the water. I wasn't the only one who saw him either. I had friends who spent the night in our guest room, saw him at the foot of the bed, and described him to a T. We eventually bought the house next door, and I never saw him again. But it was the weirdest damn thing. That's it for today's confessions. Hope you enjoyed. Like, share, and subscribe. It helps us keep going. Thanks, and see you in the next one. Toodles.